So we've looked at the process of technological growth a little bit, and now what we want to think about is how that's related to the unemployment rate. And the way we're going to think about that, remember, we're not talking about the unemployment rates ups and downs over the business cycle, but the average unemployment rate in the long run. And so in order to think about that, we need to think about how many jobs get created and how many jobs get destroyed in a country, say, over a typical quarter or year. Um, and are more jobs getting created than destroyed, and so that employment is growing? Or are more jobs getting destroyed than created, and so net employment is shrinking? And so this graph shows for a number of countries the average job destruction and job creation for a number of years, and the net employment change. And so what we're looking at is out of all the jobs in the economy, how many get destroyed every year? How many get created every year? And how many net new jobs do we get? So the red line is job destruction, and you can see it ranges from about 7% in Germany from 1977 to 99 time frame to over 12% in a more developing country like Brazil. But job creation in almost all of these countries, with the exception of the United Kingdom, is higher than job destruction. And so job creation is over 8% in Germany and over 16% in Brazil. In the United States, job destruction was about 10% and job creation was about 12%. Keep in mind what that means. One out of every 10 jobs in the United States was destroyed between, on average per year between 1988 and 1997, whereas one in every 8 jobs was created, was a new job. And the net employment was over 2%. So we're creating a lot of jobs. And so this is something to keep in mind because oftentimes we hear the number of net jobs created every month, or the number of net jobs lost during a recession. But in behind those numbers, the labor market is a really dynamic process where a lot of jobs are going away and a lot of jobs are being created. And so we want to think about that when we're thinking about the role of technological growth, in and how that's related to employment. So one of the things that we're going to discuss here is something called the Beveridge curve. And the Beveridge curve graphs the unemployment rate on the horizontal axis and the vacancy rate on the vertical axis. The vacancy rate being how many jobs are open, how many jobs do employers tell us that they are hiring for. And so the Beveridge curve shows this relationship, and it's generally a downward sloping relationship. And we'll look at this graph a little bit later between the United States and Germany. But what you can see right away is that Germany, for any vacancy rate, has a different unemployment rate, right? And so, when their unemployment rate was 6%, they had a vacancy rate of 1%, whereas we had a vacancy rate of either 2% or 3%. There's a few reasons for that. So that could be just due to sort of labor market institutions, labor market matching. It could also be due to the fact that the United States is a larger country compared to Germany, and so it's harder to move from Maine to California than from East Germany to West Germany. So here is the quarterly job creation in the United States going back to 2000. This is from a survey called JOLTS, or Job Opening Labor Turnover Survey. And you can see that what happens is that jobs tend to get created more than destroyed during expansions. So between 2003 and 2007, the blue line, the job creation line, is higher than the orange line, or job destruction line. But during the recessions, this short recession in 2001 and then the long recession, Great Recession in 2008, 2009, job destruction spikes up, and job creation goes way down. We say that job creation is counter-cyclical, whereas job creation is pro-cyclical, whereas job destruction is counter-cyclical. And so that's one of the big pieces of the Great Recession, was that a lot of jobs were destroyed. and not many jobs created, at least compared to usual. One thing to note, though, is that 5.5% of jobs were still being created at the sort of bottom of the recession. It's just that we were destroying a lot more jobs, which is why the unemployment rate went up. So here are those two Beveridge curves again for the United States and for Germany. Now, it looks for Germany that they were basically on the same Beveridge curve the whole time, right? So we start here in 2001. They had a worse recession in 2001, 2002 than the United States did. Their unemployment rate went up to 11.5%, but then they've basically been coming back down. So they're down to about 4.5% unemployment, which is actually where we are in 2017. But their vacancy rate remained relatively low compared to the United States, right? So it's between 0.5 and 1.5%. That could have a lot to do with the fact that it's a much more unionized country. Unions are much more powerful in that country, and so they might not advertise for jobs quite as much as the United States needs to. The United States, on the other hand, looks like it was on two different Beveridge curves, right? So we start here in 2001, and we see first this small recession in 2001, and then we went back. And we were basically on the same Beveridge curve, right? Those numbers are tightly related. But then in the Great Recession, we move all the way down here. We hit an unemployment rate of 10%, and then we sort of shift out so that for any given level of the vacancy rate, say 2.5%, we now have a higher unemployment rate. And some of the research that's been done around that suggests that this is really due to the number of people that have been unemployed for a long time, meaning 6 months or more. And so one of the defining characteristics of the Great Recession has been that there are a whole lot of people that have been unemployed for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. And those people have had a really hard time finding jobs again. And there's evidence that there's some level of discrimination by employers who see people that have been out of the labor market so long and they really are nervous about hiring them. And so that's going to be one of the things that we want to think about is, well, how did we go from this Beveridge curve to this sort of shifted out Beveridge curve in the United States? And one of the things that we want to think about is what's called labor market matching. And so the labor market, of course, is different from most markets in that the labor market requires, a worker to find a firm and a firm to find the worker. And so how well that process works is going to depend on a lot of things, right? One thing it's going to depend on is whether or not the workers have the skills that firms want. So if there's some sort of mismatch between unemployed workers and the jobs that firms want to fill, then it's going to take some time to uh, reduce the unemployment rate, right? To find those better matches or to train those workers that don't have the skills so that they do have the skills and then can take the jobs. It could also be that job seekers and employers may not know about each other. So, for instance, if Minneapolis is booming, but Florida is in a recession, it might be that a lot of workers in Florida could go find good jobs in Minneapolis, but they just don't know about them. It could be that there are some policies and technology that can improve efficiency. So online job postings might help improve efficiency. Any sort of new service that matches workers with firms might help improve efficiency. And so that's definitely one possibility. And then it could be that there's a problem. So if one industry experiences a negative shock, right? And so we lose a lot of jobs in that one industry and other industries are growing, and so they would be taking those workers, but those skills are different, then that could create, one of the mismatch that we talked about before, and means that the unemployment rate will stay higher for a longer period of time. So as we said before, long-run unemployment is a big problem in the United States after the Great Recession. Typically, it hadn't been a huge problem. But it's definitely, I think, one of the issues that we have in the U.S. as compared to a country like Germany. And one of the issues also is that, of course, in the long run, firms can either enter or exit, and that can change, the capital stock can change the technology. And so, if workers have been unemployed and there's a change in the capital stock, so there's new technologies, then these workers might not be ready to use the new technology. And so, what we're going to think about as our long run equilibrium in the next video is when not only is our wages constant and the employment level is constant, but the number of firms are constant as well. And now I don't really love this term long run equilibrium because it implies that there's a place that we get to at some point in the long run and we're at equilibrium, when that's really never true. We're always at a short run equilibrium, and especially when we're talking about long run growth and technological change, is we're always sort of changing technologies, although sometimes, of course, it's changing faster than others. And I think one of the things that people are worried about now is that we're in one of those times where technology is changing quickly and would have a lot more job creation and destruction than normal. And actually, right now, that looks like it's not true, but it could be true in the future.